Even though there's no explanation for this image on it, people dismiss it and think, well, it's some kind of elaborate hoax that somehow people in the past were able to trick us and we still can't figure out to this day how they did it. Here's 5 things that I wish somebody would have shared with me about Jesus. Starting with number 5, all the historical evidence that proves Jesus truly walked the earth. So growing up, I thought Jesus only existed within the Bible. I never really thought about anything outside of that. I believed in him, so I said with my mouth, but I didn't really know anything about him. I hadn't read about him. I just believed what I was told about him. So there was never really any tangible evidence that I knew of that existed outside of my own just belief. But there's actually a lot of historical evidence that proves that Jesus truly walked the earth. It just really boils down to, do you believe what's been written about him or don't you? Jesus is basically no different than any other historical figure that's ever been written about. It's just there's incredible miracles that have been written about him. So I wish that somebody had shared with me, anybody would have shared with me, that there is actually historical evidence to support Jesus and his existence. Number 4 is one of my favorites and one of the coolest ones, the Shroud of Turin, or Turin, or Turin. It's the Shroud of Turin. If you Google it, you'll see it. So the Shroud of Turin is a really cool one. It's basically a garment or a shroud that appears to have the image of what people believe is the image of Jesus on it. Craziest thing about this thing is that nobody knows how the image is even on the fabric, but it's there. Can't explain it. Modern science can't explain it. It can't be replicated. So it's just really like, whoa, what is this? And so the image looks like it's Jesus. And people who've studied it firsthand all agree that this is a garment from 1st century Palestine that's undeniable. There's even soil evidence on it. And even so, the part where it gets controversial is it's been put into a carbon dating machine, and that machine actually says that the year that this fabric is actually from is somewhere closer to the Middle Ages, which I think is really fascinating. But often people look at that and think like, oh, well, this is disproven, then this can't be from the 1st century. Even though there's no explanation for this image on it, people dismiss it and think, well, it's some kind of elaborate hoax that somehow people in the past were able to trick us and we still can't figure out to this day how they did it. Which is crazy because, what science says is this is the most advanced we've ever been. So to not be able to replicate Middle Age hoax is kind of silly. The way I see it is, what if both are true? The people who are studying it firsthand and analyzing it firsthand with their own eyes and what they know to just figure things out scientifically, they're saying it's from the 1st century, and this machine is saying it's from the mid-century. What if both are true? We can agree that what we're told about time and what year it is a guess. We don't know for certain. If we knew for certain, then we would all agree on the year. There wouldn't be the Chinese New Year, the Jewish New Year, the Gregorian calendar New Year. And I'm sure there's others as well that I'm forgetting, and forgive me if I do. But my point is that if it was agreed upon what year it is, then there wouldn't be all these other, yearly celebrations of these other cultures celebrating their new year. My point is that we can agree that we're not certain on what year it is. So what if this machine is actually telling us the truth? It's from the Middle Ages, which are closer than the 1st century. And also, the people who are studying it are correct. It's from the 1st century, or at least the 1st century of what we know it to be. So I believe both can be true, which is kind of crazy because there's this whole conspiracy out there that, the time that Jesus lived was actually a lot closer to the present time than we actually have been told it is. So that's where my whole idea for this thought came in, that they both could be true. The people who are studying it are actually telling the truth. This is from what we know to be the 1st century, and this fabric, we're saying it's for certain it's from the 1st century. And this machine is saying, well, it's from the year 1000 something, which can't be the 1st century then. So my whole hypothesis is that the year that it is today, we haven't been told the truth on. And the machine is actually telling us the actual year this garment's from, which means the 1st century to us is actually sooner than we actually think it is. So that's how I see it. They're both correct. It's just the information on what year it is false. Number 4, the Apostle Paul. I wish somebody told me about the Apostle Paul, because whether you read about him in the Bible or from secular sources, for anybody who doesn't know, secular means non-religious sources. So even outside of the Bible, Paul is written about. But this isn't why Paul is one of my favorites. Paul, in my opinion, is the greatest example of God's merciful love that he has for all of us. Because if you read about Paul, you learn that he's somebody that used to persecute and, off Christians. He himself became a Christian, or better yet, a follower of Jesus, when he was on the road to Damascus, on his way to actually persecute some Christians. And him and the group of people he was with all witnessed a blinding light that dropped them to their knees. But Paul is the only one who claims to have seen Jesus resurrected. Basically, Jesus right there in the flesh spoke to him, saying, Paul, hey, what are you doing? Like, what are you persecuting me for? Yeah, I am who I say I am. I'm Jesus. And this is what I want you to do. And so right there, instantly, Paul was changed, and he became one of the major writers of the Gospels, preaching that Jesus is Lord and he's the only way to heaven. And I think that's a fascinating story, because he used to look at people who followed Jesus as blasphemers. He was a high-ranking Jew Pharisee. He believed anybody that was speaking outside of what they believed was heresy. They're blasphemers. So he's somebody who upheld the Jewish law with passion and conviction, although he was wrong. And his heart was changed when he witnessed Jesus. And I think that's a testament to anybody who thinks that they're too far in their sin, that there's no way God can love them or forgive them for whatever they've done, that they don't even want to look towards God, that they don't even want to look at Jesus because they think that they're just so unworthy. They don't even want to look that way. But Paul says he's the most wicked man ever to have lived. And if he can be forgiven and find salvation and wholeness and completeness through Jesus, well, that just means any of us can. No matter who you are, what you've done, anybody can be saved. Anybody can be saved. And so I think Paul is just a great example, because we all feel at some point like, I'm a sinner. I'm just not the best person I could possibly be. I'm not a good person. We often can feel that way. And when we feel that way, we think to follow Jesus, we have to be perfect. But that's actually not true at all. To follow Jesus means we accept that we're imperfect and that we'll never be perfect. But if we stand any chance of even emulating what perfection looks like, we find that in following Jesus, because he shows us what perfection looks like. Although we've already fallen short, thank goodness we have someone to show us how to be like him, how to follow him, and how to live a good life that closely resembles him. Although we're going to fall short often along the way. The last one I wish somebody had told me is that if you ask God truly with an open heart and an honest and earnest heart, that you're really seeking him and you want to know him, he'll reveal himself to you in your life in a way that you'll understand. And it's interesting because it's usually going to be a real personal way that only you'll understand, which makes it difficult you can't just pull it out of your pocket and show somebody, hey, look at God, he showed up. It's for you. It's for you. It's going to do something to you. It'll speak to you. I don't know if anybody has seen my other video on what led me to God, but I went from someone who just doubted the existence of God. I even flat out said Jesus was basically a zombie, if you think about it, because he resurrected from the dead. That's how little I respected or even believed in Jesus. And then down a weird rabbit hole I went about aliens, which opened my mind to other stuff and which led me down other rabbit holes. And one day realizing that, whoa, if this side of the spectrum exists, which is opposite of God, well, then God must exist. And then I told God, I was going through some stuff, and I was like, hey, I really need you. Can you show me you're there? Can you just give me a sign, reveal yourself? And I asked him a very specific question, and he legitimately, literally, in my face, answered my prayer and led me to confessing with my mouth that Jesus is my Lord and Savior and that I'm all in, and unknowingly that changed my life and saved my life without me even knowing that saying those words with my mouth would do anything. I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no idea. And then a year later, I opened the Bible up and read about Jesus and that he offers that gift that I received. And I was like, what the heck? This is crazy. So if someone had told me sooner through all my doubt, because I'd always been looking for God. I was I was raised Catholic, fell away, got into New Age teachings. And even when I was in a New Age, I really was trying to find, well, what is God? I don't think God is over here in the Catholic religion, is how I felt. I was like, so where is God? Who is God? I didn't ever think that I was just created from nothing. I'm like, there has to be something out there that made all this stuff. So I was never that lost thinking nothing made everything. But I just thought God was something that he wasn't. When the truth is, God is far more personal, far more personable, far more tangible, and you can get to know him in a really personal way through getting to know Jesus. That's God in the flesh. You want to get to know God, get to know Jesus. It's really that simple. As crazy as this all sounds. But again, this is all coming from somebody who once said, I thought God was just the universe. I didn't even feel like Jesus existed. And now here I am, I'll tell anybody exactly what I'm telling you, because it's the truth. Because again, it really boils down to whether or not you believe he did the things that are written about him. But then if you don't believe it, you have to ask yourself, well, then why did his followers give up comfortable lives and ultimately take on lives that led to torture and their deaths? Why would they do that all for something that wasn't really as incredible as they believed to be, which was that Jesus is God in the flesh? Just know they must have really seen him resurrect from the dead if they went out and gave up their lives for Jesus. And so that's enough for me to believe, He's written about, and people actually gave up their lives just to share this message that I'm able to even share back to anybody else. I only know this message because they took on lives of torture and gave up their lives just so I could know it. And to me, I'm like, I would do that. If God came in the flesh and gave me a task and was like, hey, I need you to do this. You better believe I'm going to do it. Why wouldn't I do it? I'm like, hey, this is God. He's got my back. I've got nothing to lose. I've got the whole world behind me, basically. So I think the evidence is abundant. And if you don't believe it, more so asking why. Maybe you haven't learned the right thing that makes you believe it. And again, this is coming from someone who's really stubborn and hard-headed, who didn't believe, who now does. But I'm also patient enough to understand that these are kind of incredible and sometimes difficult things to believe because they sound so incredible. It's like there's no way this can be true. I mean, if God is real, couldn't God do all of these miracles and anything, essentially? Anything? I wish anybody had told me, because it really would have had my mind wondering more. Am I wrong about Jesus? Is God real? Jesus existed and he did these things? Yeah, that's it. See ya. That was my mouth. Wasn't a real elevator.
And the world keeps spinning.